afternoon, Suidlanders. How are you? We hope that all is well with you in these trying times. We, oopsie, where's the microphone? It's all the way over there and not doing very much, I'm sure. We hope that you're doing well in these trying times. Let's face it, it has now become apparent that firstly, many of the conspiracy theories that many of us have believed over years are confirmed. Secondly, many of the spiritual suspicions, I'm going to only go so far as to use that word because I think it would be false of me personally to talk about spiritual or religious or biblical convictions or beliefs, because in my case they weren't. They were suspicions. They were, but nevertheless, that many of those, which many of us share, have also turned out to be true or valid. I remember in late August of 2019 giving a brief speech at a meeting whose main speakers, a Suidlanders meeting in Orania, whose main speakers, whose actual speakers were Mr. Miller and Colonel Du Toit. And I just said 5-7 minutes worth of stuff after they'd spoken about the threat of an enormous financial collapse. And as much as the evidence bore out or substantiated what I had to say that night, and as much as what I had to say was based upon prodigious amounts of research, inspired a year before by a Suidlander who came to a meeting to meet me to we hosted CNN at one of Jan Fourie's Grootveld province's camps or exercises. And this particular Suidlander is not from that region, but he came anyway because he wanted the opportunity to see me and to say, hey, you really need to look into what's happening in the world of finance and economics and fiscus and financial systems and so on. And eventually he convinced me to do the necessary research. And so, as I say, 1 year later, it was almost a year later to the day, after prodigious amounts of research, I gave that speech. And even at the time, there was a part of me, this is the real point, that wondered if I could be wrong. In spite of all of the evidence, a bit like being a judge or a magistrate, you have all the evidence before you. You know that you're not making an error, but what if you are making an error? And this morning I was reminded of it because somebody sent me a video of the she's not really an economist, well, I suppose she's kind of an economist, of Catherine Austin Fitts giving a speech about the Great Reset, COVID-19, the pretexts and lies and so on. And she alluded to the meeting that took place of the G7 finance people at Jackson Hole a few days prior to the speech that I gave. So I was very, very conscious of that meeting that had taken place a few days before. And nobody in the world was talking about it. Or very, very, very few people is more honest. But it really stood out to me because I'd, as I say, spent a year trying to familiarize myself with this stuff on the basis of what this Suidlander told me to do. And so when I spoke that night, I spoke of the Jackson Hole meeting. But as I say, there was this kind of part of me that wondered if I was making an error, if I was ignorant, if I was sticking out my neck too far. But the evidence was and remains clear. And that brings me to an altogether different subject. A similar theme, but not the same subject. An article that appeared, let me just get the date here. This article doesn't have a publication date, but just hang on, I think I can find it. Thank you for your patience. Late March, it was republished on the 28th of March 2020. And I know that at the time, he has a better date. Here's a better date, and this is really telling. Thanks for your patience, guys. I know it can be tedious to listen to and watch somebody speak slowly. October the 24th, 2019, as far as I can tell. Yeah, there we go. I've got the right ones. Yeah. Okay. So it was republished on the 24th of October 2019. And I've got the source from which it was republished. So presumably it was published earlier that day, or the previous day, or whenever prior to the 24th of October. 24th of October 2019. And the article is, I've got it here on the original source as far as I can tell, which is nowtheendbegins.com. Nowtheendbegins.com. And the title of the article is Big Pharma and Microsoft are teaming up in something called the ID 2020 Alliance that will combine vaccinations with implantable microchips to create your digital ID. The ID 2020 Alliance, as it's being called, is a digital identity program that aims to leverage immunization as a means of inserting tiny microchips into people's bodies. In collaboration with the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations, also known as Gavi, the government of Bangladesh, since then it's turned out to be many more governments, and various other partners in government, academia, and humanitarian relief, the ID 2020 Alliance hopes to usher in this mark of the beast as a way to keep tabs on every human being living on Earth. Now, I don't want to push this thing too far. I don't want to evangelize anybody to think like I do, or like, who knows, let's think of a name, Japie van Zyl, or Adriaan Snyman, the author, the man who has done so much to bring to people's awareness the work of Sina van Rensburg, or the prophecies of Sina van Rensburg. Before I go on, I'll just mention to you that the article was written by Jeffrey Grider. I don't know him from Adam. On October the 24th, 2019, right, so it was republished the very same day. Big Pharma is officially partnering with the tech industry to pair immunization with digital biometrics, meaning humans will soon be microchipped, tracked, and ultimately controlled through a global identification matrix. Now, what may be of interest to you is that let's just check our facts here quickly. World Military Games 2019. Okay, we're going to check two things here. The 2019 Military World Games were held in Wuhan. Yes, the same notorious Wuhan. From the 18th to the 27th of October 2019, obviously. And it has been reported that some of the soldiers, the military people, soldiers, airmen, sailors, returning from the World Military Games after the 27th of October 2019, returned to their countries, particularly the USA, or it was particularly reported in the USA, with strange flu-like symptoms. Now, during that 18th to the 27th period, this guy, Jeffrey Grider, wrote in Now the End Times Begin, on the 24th of October, that there was this plan to use immunization as a kind of a vehicle or a vector for implanting microchips in everybody. Okay. Now I want to point out something else that I think is relevant. My poor computer is going slowly. Okay, I'm not getting what I want to see, but I do know that the claim has been made by credible people that the Chinese could have informed the USA, or informed the world more correctly, at the end of November, if I remember correctly. So you may recall that it was right at the end of December that the Chinese government, I believe it could have been the 31st of December, the very last day of December 2019, that the Chinese government began to admit that there was if not a pandemic, an epidemic, if not an epidemic, a number of cases. Use your own preferred term. But that at that point, they began to say, yeah, we've got a little problem here. And the allegation is that they should have done so a month prior. So we've got roughly the end of October that the Military World Games finish, roughly the end of November, when by apparently all of the right and correct standards, the Chinese should have been reporting something, and then the end of December, when they did indeed report something. Then I would put it to you that we fast forward about 3 to 4 to 5 months, even 6 months, to roughly the end of May, the end of June, that we reported, obviously we weren't the first, that the South African government had signed up to be one of the 15 pioneer countries of a vaccine passport. And it was reported, it was sent to me by Johan Grobelaar, it was reported on the, I'm struggling to think of the name of the website, VST Enterprises website. vst.co.uk, if I remember correctly, or vste.co.uk. VST Enterprises, a tech company, reported that 15 countries had already signed up to pioneer a vaccine passport. And that was really in the early days. Because if you remember correctly, in April, May, June roughly of 2020, nobody was taking the idea of a vaccine passport seriously. And we were, I think, the very, very, very first to report it. Because I know that Zero Hedge, which is a terrific publication, only reported it on the day before us, or the same day as we did, or the day or two after, roughly the same time. So we were one of the very, very first, having got that from Johan Grobler. My point is that we can now look back at some of the stuff that we might have been unsure of at the time, as I was not 100% sure of what I was talking about when I said there is a looming economic crisis of biblical proportions that is inescapable and unavoidable, which will at some point erupt and destroy us all. And of course we can do other videos on that. That threat remains. It has become far more severe in the interim. But the point being that we were warning people of what was coming, not sure if we had our facts straight. And similarly, we were talking about things like vaccine passports, things like implantable microchips, things like Big Pharma and Microsoft in some sort of sinister alliance, things like the ID 2020 alliance. Was it true? Things like Gavi. We were speaking about Gavi almost 2 years ago. But not being 100% sure. Not catching them with their hands in the cookie jar. Inferring as best we could, and not getting carried away, I'd like to believe, from the evidence. But was the evidence tantamount to utter proof? No. Now, however, we see how right we were for so long. And I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, that we're at a point now where it's fairly easy to make certain forecasts as long as we keep humility and modesty in mind at all times and don't get carried away with ourselves, with near 100% reliability. It's clear now that there are certain things which must emerge, which must develop, which must transpire in the weeks and months that lie ahead of us. Today is the 19th of November in 2021. But in the weeks and months that lie ahead of us, it's clear that certain things are going to happen, and it's clear that certain things are happening. For instance, what's happening in Australia is pretty indisputable. If you call it history's most draconian curfew, if you call it non-legislated state action or illegal state action, if you call it unprecedented in the history of mankind, if you call it overstepping the boundaries or all rational boundaries of government, if you call it tantamount to the ways and means of communism, if you call it an echo of Pol Pot's rule in Cambodia, if you call it an echo of Stalinism, if you call it an echo of Mao Zedong, there are phenomenal things happening in the world, and those phenomenal things have logical consequences, or logical natural reactions. And I think that it's safe to say that none of them are for the good. So I leave you today, ladies and gentlemen, with the thought that at some point in time we are going to have to act not talk, debate, discuss, plan, prepare, think, act meaningfully to protect ourselves from what may also be, without me trying to evangelize you and trying to convince you that this is clearly the first, what do you call it, the first of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Nobody's trying to do that. Without that, we must all agree that this is a threat beyond, I want to say, human imagination. And sooner or later, we're going to have to do something. That's the final thought in this video. Thank you very much for watching this video. I know it's been a long one. And may our Lord God bless and keep you in the difficult times that lie ahead of us. Thank you and bye-bye.